order.
Sorry.
So I'll start with the roll call. So first, Vice Chair Andre Tessman. You're muted, Vice Chair Tessman. Vice Chair Andre Tessman, are you there? I see you.
Uh-oh. Worried he can't hear you. Hi, can you hear us? I don't think he can even hear us.
All right, I'll keep rotating around.
Looks like I've been
Commissioner
trying to.
Chris Aliff,
Present.
David Goodman,
Present.
Daryl Lambert, Niraj Mathur, Steve Smith.
Here.
Okay, and Vice Chair Andre Tessman.
Present.
Thank you, by the way, for chairing the last meeting. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the opportunity. Everyone suffered with me.
So can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is approved. Any public comments for items not on the agenda? Hearing none. Move on to the council liaison report.
There we go, already. I just got a message that Commissioner Lambert should be joining shortly.
Okay.
All right, so I've got a couple of things here to make sure that I update you folks on. The first is the council retreat that we had toward the end of March on the 25th and 26th. There, we discussed council member priorities, including the capital improvement plan, which includes a number of projects that we would spend capital on to either build or refurbish or replace things. A good example is a lot of our play structures around town at the parks have aged, and so we are slowly on a rotation replacing those. Another thing would be the community center expansion. So we discussed a number of those sorts of priorities. We also discussed some policy goals with regard to policing, affordable housing, and staffing levels, which is an ongoing major concern for the city because we have a number of gaps in our current staffing. We also discussed a plan for the biennial budget, which will cover the next 2 years. We also got a clean audit from the state auditor's office. There were no findings that were reported, which is not necessarily a given for a city of our size. So we're very proud of that. Let's see, a few more things here. The council has approved several measures to address the city staffing levels. One thing is that we are looking at and actually approved a contract with a temporary employment agency to temporarily fill some of our gaps. We have some hiring incentives that we implemented for the year. And we're also in contract with hiring consultants to help us fill especially some of our department chair positions that are currently empty, or department director. Yeah, that's the right word. Anyway, yeah, to fill in some of those vacancies, especially toward the top. Let's see, what else? I'll do that last. The council also discussed the future of in-person or hybrid meetings for both the council and for the council committees. Those could occur as early as this month, but no decision, I don't think, has been finalized on that front. Once we've gotten that going a little bit, then we'll start talking about the commission meetings and perhaps moving those to in-person or hybrid as people like. But I don't think that the Finance and Administration Committee has gotten to the level of talking about commission meetings yet. I do have one more thing to report on, and that is that I just want to state just the facts, because it still has not actually been officially finalized, and I'll explain in a moment what I mean by that. But the council has affirmed the Historic Design Review Board, which is you folks, decision regarding the rails. However, the city attorney is currently preparing an official statement that the council may adopt at our next meeting. But given the nature of the issue, I don't think I should say anything more than essentially just stating that's where it currently is at. But I'd be happy to take any of your questions and then defer to Mr. Rogers as needed.
I did have one question.
Yeah.
You mentioned public safety was one of the discussions last month. How big is the gap we have with our police force at this point?
We are, I think they gave the numbers. We are down a number of officers. I'm not sure how public the numbers are, so I don't want to step in something that I shouldn't. But at any rate, yeah, we're definitely down a number of officers, and we are actively trying to fill them. There are a number of state level things that are involved with that. There are a number of requirements that officers have to achieve before they can be onboarded, and those are all important things, but it's one of the things that has delayed the process. Yeah, Commissioner Testman.
Councilmember Johnson, kind of on that front, I'm just curious if and if it's public knowledge, but what the main drivers of that gap were. And the reason I asked that question is just because I was actually reading in the Seattle Times probably 2 weeks ago about some communities, north of Seattle that basically saw an exodus of Seattle police officers applying to their department. So it seems it's been beneficial for smaller communities. Unfortunately, Seattle's woes. I'm just curious what's driving our personnel gaps.
Yeah, I think that a big part of that has been differences in incentives for hiring. Some places are simply offering more incentive to work for them than we have. However, our police chief has confided in me that when he talks to prospective police officers, he's usually able to bring them on board by telling them a little bit more about our community and just how great it is to work for the city of Snoqualmie. So I think that helps a little bit. But I did mention a little bit about some of our hiring incentives that we as a council passed as well, that will hopefully help us bridge that gap a little bit more and be a little bit more competitive. Mr. Rogers, do you have something to add to that?
I just wanted to add that just to add a little more color to what Councilmember Johnson was saying is that we're seeing an overall pretty competitive market, especially for police officers and for what are called lateral police officers. Those are officers with experience. So while some regional cities, namely Seattle, have certainly lost a fair number of officers, they have been heavily. They have a lot of options because everybody's looking for police officers right now across the region and the country for that matter. This is a very attractive place to work. We do have multiple officers in the hiring process right now, so we are going to get those positions filled. The police chief is pretty confident of that. The real challenge is that for any new officers, so which is to say not laterals from other communities, they need to go through a relatively extensive training process. As Councilmember Johnson said, it takes, I believe, about a year to go through the state academy and for them to get certified as a police officer who can work independently. So we are working hard on it, and we're confident we'll get there. It's just it takes a little bit of time with these kind of positions, unfortunately.
Yeah, and of course, it's a good thing to make sure that you have officers that are ready to excel at their jobs, and that's what we want is the best officers we can get. But it's a double-edged sword.
And frankly, it's just competitive out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that goes for every position. It is very hard right now to find folks who want to, I shouldn't say who want to, I should say it's very hard to entice some of those department director positions because it's just so competitive out there.
Well, thanks for elaborating on that. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the questions. Anything else? All right, well, thank you so much, and carry on.
Thank you. And so I understand the minutes will be provided at the next planning commission meeting. So we'll move on to the next agenda item. Permit review, design review board, item number 1, DRB 22-004, Snoqualmie Tribe Coffee House and Gift Shop.
All right, so we have here tonight Mr. Skidmore, who represents the applicant. Mr. Skidmore is the primary architect working on this, and Mr. Gamble will provide the staff report for this. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get ready and share my screen with you all. I want to start us off with the distinctions between what you all have worked on so far for many of you, and Planning Commission's history is working on historic design review. So as I believe I've brought up before, historic design review is a much more narrowed in, zoomed in area within the downtown and very close to the intersection of Meadowbrook and Park Avenue. So right in there, there's about 2 blocks thereabouts from Meadowbrook intersection, Park Avenue intersection, and then it's kind of a funky shape around Railroad Avenue, with Falls Avenue and Maple Avenue being part of that. This, however, is not within the historic design review district, so it has a slightly different criteria set for when we review these types of projects. As you can imagine, when you're someone who is developing a historic design review set of criteria, you're looking more to the historic nature of the buildings and features, whereas design review is going to be looking more to the appropriateness of the building and its design within the neighborhood, or how does it achieve its landscaping goals. We'll see a couple of these as we hear from the applicant tonight, but I wanted to give you a kind of an understanding of a distinction, so we're not going to look so much at like architectural facade detailing like we would see in the historic design review. So a lot of those architectural standards we won't be delving into tonight, but it'll be kind of similar in a lot of ways. So if we're on a map, the proposed project is at the Falls. So for many of you, if you're like me, you start with a map and you try to find Boris Lake on it, and then you can direct yourself. So we're gonna go towards the Falls. And I'm sure many of you have driven down here past the pedestrian bridge that connects you with the PSC parking lot on the upper side and Stage Lodge here. Coffee shop and questions are right here. It's in a zoning that's called Utility Park, another kind of more unique design review opportunity, as we don't see a lot of projects that are in the utility park that are going to be coming up for design review. It's a bit more unusual. I wanted to also show you kind of what the lot looks like currently. I just pulled up, November 2021's Google Maps, and I wanted to, just in case give you a frame of reference in case you've never come down this parking lot. Here's the that pedestrian ramp, and then we're actually in the parking strip that's parallel to the road, which is right here to that I'm pointing out. You can access this in 2 ways, from this side and this side. But if you've ever gone there on a some summer day, a nice summer day on a Saturday, you'd be hard pressed to swing into this parking lot super easily. So just that's a fair warning there for you. Here's the building, however. It was currently a coffee shop when the Snoqualmie Tribe bought it. Now they have intentions of updating the facade workings, and I'm not going to go too much into detail. I'm going to save that for Mike. I don't want to steal his thunder. Yeah, so I will leave it there, but the general premise of the project is not to tear the building down or start from scratch, but we're talking about redeveloping the frontage. So, remodeling the frontage. The roof has different roof lines, and then there's going to be some differences to the deck and the way the deck is accessed in the front. But I believe you'll see that better with Mike's presentation. And so, Mike, if you don't mind, I might just go ahead and link it right to you, and you just let me know what page you'd like me to start on your designs here.
Thanks, Dylan. Hi, I'm Mike Skidmore. I'm in my basement tonight, so nice to meet y'all. And yeah, like Dylan said, so this is the existing. I would call it secondary coffee. It's mostly a gift shop. If you've ever been in here, it is full, and it is just full of all kinds of knickknacks and things. They do sell coffee, and then anything, bags of rocks and all those other things that you might want to buy when you visit the falls. The overall arching premise for this project is to enhance the experience of the end user, and also to introduce a little bit of the Snoqualmie tribe to the people who do visit this coffee shop. And so with that in mind, and with the utility park zoning, which is a unique zoning, it has setbacks, crazy setbacks and all these things. And this lot has been carved up out of, this zone has been carved up out of a different zone. So if you could go to page 4 for me, Dylan, of the PDF. I'll just kind of show you the next page right here. So as you can see, so the heavy black, down a little bit, there you go. The heavy black line in this diagram to your left is the site plan, is the property line. You can see that it's a crazy site. This was carved out back when this was built. It was originally a restaurant, and then it's been serving as a coffee house and gift shop for a number of years. It's currently a non-conforming, I believe, non-conforming use, but it's been grandfathered in with its use over time. So what our goal here was to remodel this thing, bring some life back in, give it a sense of place without expanding the footprint or going higher than the current ridge height. That's very important because you have the high voltage power lines that are running above and to the east of this site. So if you could head to page, let's just go to page 7, I'll give you a look at the new front elevation. 2 more down. Here we go. So the bottom drawing is the existing elevation, and the top drawing on that page is the proposed. So what we've done is we've taken this hip and this fireplace that sits central facing the parking lot. We've opened this up with a gable face, put large windows in front, did a new entry over the existing, a new awning and entry over the existing doors. And then we're going to clad this thing in a more appropriate material instead of paint. So we're going to use cedar shake and cedar vertical siding, concrete, charcoal roof, and heavy timbers, and then black windows. And this is just more of a Northwest vernacular. And again, the building footprint does not increase. The actual roof area decreases by approximately 36 square feet. So we're actually making the impervious area smaller and just enhancing the exterior experience. If you want to go down to page, I guess just go to the next page. You can see this is a view looking from the deck, if you will. The site has some grade to it. You enter, from the right, from the parking lot, and then the site slopes away down as it goes to the falls, to the north and to the west. Again, same material palette. And just again, sorry, here I'm looking at mine. So let's just go to page 10. This is a perspective view. There's plenty of other perspectives in the packet. Again, it's the overall goal is to make this a place that connects to its site better than it is today, and also helps tell a little bit of the story of the tribe. Inside, we're still using it as a coffee shop and gift shop. Let's go to page, I'll pull up the plan, second to last page, page 18. Yep, that one right there. Yep. So again, it's you enter the double doors there right above where it says Pacific Studio. You enter and you go in, and to the right is the gift shop. You stay straight. The coffee is on your left. There's additional gift shop and some seating. We've also carved out a couple areas where we're going to tell a little bit of the timeline of the tribe, provide some imagery to just introduce people who are coming to the site, introduce them to what the Snoqualmie tribe is about, and that this place is a place of welcoming and a place of, it's a place, it's been here forever. And it's a place for people to come and gather. And they wanted to just increase the awareness around that, but we'll still be selling goods. And again, it's very simple architecturally. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So I do want to get input from the commissioners, but I do have one quick question. We changed the title to Snoqualmie Tribe and you've referenced the history. Are tribe members and representatives involved in this planning?
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay,
we
good,
have
good.
yes, we have all the elders yes. We actually been working with them for over a year. We started this process back in April of last year, and it's been through certain iterations. And in order to, in order to meet the current use and maintain that use, we are keeping it a coffee house and gift shop, but introducing some elements of that introduction. And we've been working closely with the tribe.
Good, good. Any other commissioners want to weigh in? Commissioner Tessman?
Yes, one question, just as I look at the plans here, just to confirm my understanding, it looks like the current building, the dumpsters are not fenced in, but that is something that'll change with this remodel.
Yes, that is the idea. We're going to put up some gates there so that you do not see that from the parking area.
Perfect. And so that would be fenced in, and then it looks like there's a secondary gate separating essentially the dumpster area from, it looks like, some outside storage for a shipping container.
Yeah, so that area back there, number 17 on that, well, if you go down one, that's the existing plan you're looking at. Yeah, so as you can see, the shipping container and the storage are there. That upper right corner on that drawing, yeah, that is current. They do have a fence currently there and some screening, but the dumpsters are in front.
Just open.
And just open. So we're going to close that off. And so you're not driving up and seeing the dumpsters.
Okay, perfect.
Anything
And
else?
will capacity, with the footprint staying the same, the actual building occupancy capacity won't change at all?
That's correct.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you very much. It looks great.
Thank you, Commissioner Tessman. Commissioner Goodman?
Yeah, I was very excited to see this in the packet today because every time I go by there, the building looks a little tired and a little, not somewhere I'm like itching to go check out. So I'm really happy to see the plans. To me, it looks really great and a little more modern and perked up, and I really like it a lot. I did have this isn't exactly relevant to the design necessarily, but what was, assuming we started over on this site, what is the intended use of the current zoning?
I don't have that answer. I apologize. I got kind of a late notice that the meeting was at 7:30.
Oh, it's no problem.
So, I think that, Dylan, I don't know if you know off the top of your head what the answer to that is.
Yeah, I can. In fact, if you give me just a split second, I will even show you the extent of what the utility district zoning is. The general sense of it, as you can imagine, a lot of the zoning in the city is capturing existing features or qualities. So for instance, the falls is already an existing feature. The equipment that was present, like for an example, the PSC, power stations, all the charging equipment. The zoning is to capture the existing use as it is and kind of lock it in and make it track with what the zoning allowances are. So we don't really have a utility park zoned area that isn't already capturing its intended use. So as a utility equipment facility to some extent. And so, sorry, just about got this map here and I want to share with you kind of like the the extent of it. So that's kind of why this site is a bit of an anomaly, in that there's not a lot of overlap between the different types of. Sorry, I have you guys all paused right now while I frantically try to pull up this zoning map.
Well, and I have, I guess, another question. Can you, maybe this is in the plans here, can you talk a little more about the extent to which the interior is getting a remodel in addition to the exterior?
Yeah, the interior is going to get a full remodel. Of course, we're going from a hip roof on the front to a gable. When you walk in, there'll be sort of some welcome imagery that we're working with the tribe and Pacific Studio on developing. There'll be a timeline about the place. And the retail experience will go from their hot #1 seller of a bag of rocks to more of an I don't want to offend anyone in this sense, but more of an elevated experience with less items, better coffee. We're actually working with a roaster. Originally, we wanted to put a roaster in here, but the tribe did not want that. So it's going to be an elevated experience inside. You're going to have lots of natural woods and metals, and you will feel like you're in the Northwest and not in some, just some knickknack shop anywhere in South Dakota or New Mexico or, Western Washington. It's going to feel like it belongs in its place.
I don't know where people are going to get their bags of rocks anymore, but
we will still sell them. They just won't be the primary
I
feature.
see. Okay.
Right.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And I guess separately, the reason I asked about the zoning is I just found it a bit odd. Maybe the purpose was to try to lock in the current use indefinitely, but I found it a bit odd that in the case that it turned into something else, it would be whatever would fit in the utility zone. We don't have to talk about it anymore. I was just curious about it.
I can kind of go further. Sorry, Jason, do you want to?
Oh, I said just for the really brief history on the utility park zone it was and is really intended to, as you can see, accommodate the Puget Sound Energy's facilities at Snoqualmie Falls. And then, of course, it accommodates the city's wastewater treatment plant and public works facility up there. The little carve out, the orange or brown carve out that Dylan just clicked on there, that's the Salish Lodge itself. So that's in a commercial zone. This building here that we're discussing tonight is, a bit of an outlier in there, in that it is zoned utility park. It is on a very small carve out parcel. I couldn't tell you the exact history of how that came to be. With that small carve out, that is, other than that particular parcel, is part of has been part of the Salish Lodge ownership and not owned by Puget Sound Energy for a number of years now. It was formerly owned by, of course, Gateway Cascade when they owned the Salish Lodge, then the Muckleshoot tribe, and now the Snoqualmie tribe. So it does present some interesting and somewhat unique issues in that regard. And that, so like I said, that's just the super brief history of why the utility park zone exists.
Good, very good. Commissioner Aliff, did you have a comment?
No, I was going to bring some extra context that Roger's covered.
Okay. Well, I certainly would echo what Commissioner Goodman said, and I'm doubly pleased that not only spruces it up, but the elders of the tribe were involved and support this upgrade. So understand the conditions as listed in the recommendation are fire permit and building permit prior to construction.
Yes, that's correct. All the permitting in addition to this one is essentially what that is trying to capture. But yeah, you'll typically see the standard building, SEPA determinations, fire marshal, those types of things. They're not conditions of approval. They're just required in addition to this approval.
No, I understand.
So there is no additional conditions of approval to this that are beyond, the standard building permit required parts.
Okay.
We add those to catch people to make sure that they're, tracking with the process that we have for them, so they don't, get out of step. But that's not likely for this project.
Okay. I have reviewed this document, and we can have further discussion, but I will entertain a motion to approve DRB 22-0004 as written for the Snoqualmie Tribe Coffee House and Gift Shop.
Second.
Wait, I'm looking for a motion to approve it.
Oh, motion approved.
Can I have a second?
A second.
Okay, that's Commissioner Aliff. Motion to approve. Commissioner Goodman was the second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, good job.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mike, you're welcome to stick around if you like, but don't feel like you need to stay.
So,
I'm gonna go take care of my 9 and 6-year-old. Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
Understood. Have a good night.
Thank you. So next agenda item, the historic downtown relook.
All right.
Yes.
Dylan's on tap for this one too.
I am, and I'm gonna get caught up with you. I want to make sure I screen share all the right things and not the wrong things.
I think before Dylan proceeds, the first thing we should note here is that we did notice a public hearing to take input on this tonight. So before we proceed, so it may be helpful to have Dylan give a brief presentation first, and then you can open the public hearing chair to take public input. We do have 2 attendees here tonight who may be interested in doing so.
Okay,
Perfect. Would you like me to give that presentation before you take any public comment?
I would, yes.
All right. I will share my screen. This is the staff report that is for the downtown relook. It's the code language that we have been working through for the past few months now. So I hope you're all very familiar with it. However, I have turned everything upside down for you a bit, and that I've changed the structure in the way it looks as it's going to be presented going forward. So as many recall, the code language is to try to capture the ideas that we wanted to change within the downtown historic district's language to more or less capture the street furniture type details, the the right-of-way furniture that could be included as a requirement of redevelopments, things of that nature. In addition, there is a bit about screening in here as well as a secondary capture in the very elegantly named service loading waste enclosure standards. So we've spoken through that. That's a lot of your screening type requirements that we have for, kind of like what we just talked about, the last development project that we were reviewing, where I believe it was Commissioner Tessman that brought up the, is the trash receptacles screened? So if we didn't have the code language to capture the requirement for that, it'd be difficult for us to enforce it. In a way, this is an expansion of the existing code language that does somewhat capture that, but this is far more expansive. And then the last section here is on the changes to the definition sections in the code section for the historic district. That's what 1735-040 is beginning, is the historic district code. And we added 2 callouts as definitions, one being for the downtown master plan, and one being for the downtown vision plan. And what this allows the reviewing staff for historic design review projects to call upon the concepts and ideas that are within these 2 documents. Before this, it would be difficult to connect them in any sort of meaningful way as a reviewing body. So this allows that process to take place. And then back to kind of where we stand now and where we're going. The document looks different now because this is the standard in which we begin to change the code. This process starts with a public hearing, which is what we're in right now. The public hearing has to get sent out 10 days in advance through the newspaper, public locations, so at City Hall and the post office, as well as on the city's website. So with that in mind, the concept is that we're making sure that it's a more publicly accessible concept. This isn't in the dark, so to speak. So as we're kind of going through that, you also see that the the document's written a little bit differently. This document's design is now to capture the kind of technique that is traditionally used to change code, rather than the thing I had you working with before, which I was calling a worksheet, but that was just my way of quickly moving through the changes to the code as we were working through them. This document is trying to demonstrate how other cities and this city in the past has changed its code. You're going to see a lot of characteristics that are very similar. For example, the code section that we're suggesting be removed, crossed out in red, the suggestion that we're be replaced is in the blue. And we've gone over all these code sections many times now, but if you do see any errors, please let me know now. However, the structure here is trying to be kind of quick, neat, more focused, but to achieve the same goals that we've been working on all this time. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Associate Planner Gamble. Before we dive in for commissioner discussion, I do want to open this up for public comment after that overview. Do we have any public comment to this historic design review as presented? Councilmember Johnson, are you speaking as a public?
No, it was just a more procedural question. And this is perhaps for staff. If this is a public hearing, does it officially have to be stated as, a public hearing is now open and then a request for public comment, or is simply saying, does anyone want to comment count as opening the public hearing?
For the record, it is preferred if the chair specifies that we're opening the public hearing and then call for any members of the public who wish to provide testimony. Yeah, and you make at least a couple of calls for that, 2 or 3, and then if nobody steps forward, you can then close the public hearing. We usually like to note the time, so you would say, for example, I'll open the public hearing at 8:08 p.m. and then go through that and then close it and note the time as well.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Johnson and Director Rogers. So I would like to call the public hearing open as of 8:08 p.m. on April 4th and ask for comments or testimony from the public. Are there any public comments on the historic downtown relook as we've just covered the overview?
Chair, it doesn't appear that either one of the individuals in the attendees list are requesting to speak at this time.
Okay, hearing no comments then, we'll close the public hearing at 8:09 p.m. April 4th for the historic downtown relook. And at this point, I'd like to open up for discussion to commissioners, but I do want to compliment Associate Planner Gamble for really dressing that up and making it clean. I think after going through that for as long as we have, it looks, you can apprehend it. You look at it, and you immediately see what you were doing here. So I really appreciate how you've laid this out here. So now I'm opening up for the commission. Any commentary or discussion? Commissioner Aliff?
I went through this document and I found a couple of things that might be errors, so I wanted to point them out. So on page 104, line or section D3, the line starts at least one amenity element, repeats elements from the previous line. So if you read through that whole sentence, I think you'll see it. Copy paste error, something like that in there. Yeah.
Appreciate it. I'm writing these down, so if I'm not making eye contact with the screen, I guess, but
No worries. Total knit element D6, you have a couple extra spaces in there after add. And then I want to get down to like the stuff that I thought was really important, which was obstruct pedestrian movement on 13. So my main concern there is I would find some of the things that we had listed otherwise in this, potentially obstructing pedestrian movement like a garbage can. I don't know if there's any way for us to clarify that language to make it clear what we mean by obstruction of the pedestrian way. Does that make sense? Am I clear?
That's a good question.
Would you remind me which line that is? Sorry, I was writing things down frantically and missed
No,
the.
I mean, yes, it's a line, it's on page 2, bullet 13. Features that are publicly funded, already required by code, and or obstruct pedestrian movement shall not qualify as an amenity to meet this standard.
Is it page 2?
Page 2 on the
Top.
packet, page 31, page 2 on this particular agenda item.
Okay.
If that makes sense. We got 2 page numbers to work off of.
Yeah, I know. I think I messed myself up. And I want to share a screen with you guys, and I'm feeling like a very silly person for not being able to find this.
So it's in the first in the exhibit, Dylan. The first one, a modifications to street furniture standards, and then you amend 1735 to 40D, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way down, and then number 13 under there.
Features that are publicly funded. Oh, geez. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it.
It's possible you could add a simple single qualifying word right in front of obstruction to pedestrian movement. You could say complete obstruction to pedestrian movement, or sufficient. I don't know, any type of term that would give the next planning commission, who's ever reviewing it, the awareness of the intent.
I think what we have here is the intent behind this. So to put some context around this, there's a minimum standard that we can't you cannot fully obstruct a sidewalk, because there needs to be a certain minimum width for barrier-free accessible travel on any sidewalk. So we would not allow anything to affect that. I think what this is attempting to get at is that it's possible to adhere to that standard and essentially have effectively a wall along the sidewalk, or just a giant barrier of some kind. And so I think this is worded a little bit, admittedly vaguely here, but to give the planning commission, and sitting as it would as the historic design review board, to apply this some teeth to say, look, that this amenity, whatever you want to call it, is too big, or it's too impactful to the sidewalk for pedestrian movement. So even if it, strictly speaking, meets you can't, make a less than, I believe it's 30 inches. It may be, I think it's a 30-inch minimum. It may be bigger than that. Then, yeah, that still works, but that's a pretty narrow passage, especially if you're in a situation where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. Maybe you're forcing people off into, potentially forcing people over the curb at that point. I think we could probably reword this a little bit to make it a little more clear, certainly. Because you're right. Right now, that's an extremely subjective thing to put in there that would be difficult to apply, because strictly speaking, anything would obstruct pedestrian. Other than a clear, sorry, we could put a light pole in that, and you could argue it obstructs pedestrian movement.
That's the point I'm trying to get to, is to make certain that we're not making it arbitrary. Yeah.
Commissioner Goodman?
I guess to that point, I'm wondering, is there a case in which something that does obstruct pedestrian movement would be approved anyway, even if it's not counted as an amenity. Does that make sense?
The way this is written, that is theoretically possible.
So I guess I mean, if it's just sort of a quirk, then that's fine. I just wanted to be clear that that's not actually, if it's not clear elsewhere in the code, it should be.
Yeah. I think you're right that that situation could certainly arise because, you know, a very strict, careful reading of the way this is phrased would imply that you can do it, but it's not going to count. So, you know, in practice, the commission could likely condition an approval to say, don't do that. But it starts to get a little tricky at that point. So.
Commissioner Lambert?
Aren't there legal requirements for the width of sidewalks that would limit this anyways?
Yes, that's the accessibility requirement I was just speaking to, that there is a minimum clear width that needs to be maintained. I think the intent is that even though you have that minimum width, what if something is maintaining that width, but the commission doesn't necessarily think it's a good idea? You know, you want to maintain, say, 5 feet of width because you have a lot of pedestrian traffic. And so I think the idea here is this provision would give the commission some teeth to say, no, we don't like that. It's not going to count. But I think, you know, I think we're looking at how could we reword this a little bit to make it a little more clear and not so so vague.
What were those words you used, Jason? You said minimally. What were the words you used that you talked about, the obstruction or the amount of sidewalk you had to have open?
Yeah, there's 2 requirements in play here. There's the federal ADA standard, Americans with Disabilities Act standard, and then you have the state barrier-free requirements that both interact here. And I'll admit I can't remember what the exact minimum is. I want to say it's 30 inches, 2.5 feet, but it may actually be more than that these days. So I think based on what we're attempting to do with this language, I don't think that particularly matters because something like that could not be approved. We wouldn't let it happen because we would be out of compliance with other laws. But to the extent this provision exists to try to give the Planning Commission, the Historic Design Review Board, some more teeth on, you know, something that meets the strict letter of the minimum width, but isn't necessarily what the commission's looking for in a streetscape amenity. I think we can probably try to word it better to address, you know, the concerns we're hearing from the commissioners.
Okay. Yeah, that was a good catch, I think. So just to circle back, Commissioner Eliff, did you have any other points to highlight?
Not with this one, but in the next section.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lambert.
Before we leave this section, really quickly, long time ago, we talked about point number 5, the public trash receptacles. And for 2 points on this one was what were we going to allow these to be an amenity that people put in? And the other question was, if let's say that the ice cream shop puts this in as an amenity, does that mean the city of Snoqualmie is emptying the trash? The other one was number 8, bicycle racks. I know this was a very long time ago, but Dylan was going to go count the bicycle racks, I think. I think we have 12 of them in downtown Snoqualmie.
12 racks or 12 spaces on racks?
I think we have 12 racks. It's either 9 or 12. It was a long time that I actually looked at it because I just went for a stroll.
Unfortunately, I did not count them.
Yeah, this got lost in the shuffle because we didn't have commission meetings forever and everybody changed.
Possible. I don't know, I'm certainly open to suggestions on the trash thing. It may be more beneficial, frankly, to delete it. Understanding that, as you've brought up, Commissioner Lambert, I think there's a threshold issue of where exactly does it get placed and whose responsibility is it? You know, certainly any trash receptacle that's inside somebody's building is clearly their private, you know, trash bin that they would be responsible for emptying. But, you know, things on the sidewalk in the right of way, you know, are emptied by the city. So,
And I don't find it difficult to find a trash receptacle in downtown. Like, I think we've got
Right.
enough personally.
yeah, I mean, I know there's two right by, you know, on each side of the mid-block crosswalk right there, and then there's quite a few.
Yeah.
And I know and there's, I think there's more down at each corner, and the Parks Public Works Director and his crew are working pretty hard to keep things in good shape down there and looking nice.
Well, I mean, I know they don't have enough to do, but giving them more trash receptacles.
So unless there's any objections, why don't we delete number 5? Because I agree, actually, that's a good catch. I don't think it would impact this document at all.
I can keep a running list of the suggested changes and call out the corrections at the end. That way.
Okay. Yes. So let's delete the public trash receptacle item there.
Bill, it may be more helpful to actually just amend number 5 to just straight up state public trash receptacles well, actually, maybe we're about to delete it. You're right. I was thinking in my head how to reword it, and I decided, no, actually, we're better off without it.
Yeah.
So, okay. Should I just roll with the delete then for now?
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus of the commission, unless there's, sorry, I don't hear an objection from anybody.
Okay. And then just to make sure we're on the same page here, D3, there's some accidental repeating, and then on D6 there's some extra spacing, which I could see now.
Right.
And it's very frustrating that I could see it now, and I didn't see it when I was proofreading. But go ahead and ignore that.
It provides visual interest.
That's the second sentence I saw after that too.
Maybe
Just
read
have a
every
clock
word.
count
So.
in there, Dylan. See if anybody noticed.
So any other commissioner comments on this section? Those are great comments, by the way. Comments? Okay, why don't we move on to the next section?
Before we go on, so Dylan, can you go back up so we can see number 13, the obstruct pedestrian movement? So I just want to get a sense of the commission here before we move on. Is there a sense to just delete that part of the sentence? Or should we reword it or attempt to reword it to try to capture a little more of capture the intent a little better here? I'm fine either way. I just want to get some clarity before we move on.
Yeah, I thought we left it as rewarded to provide some clarity, because as you mentioned, it does provide the commission and future commissions with a little bit of teeth, as you put it. So I think a little clarity would be, rewarding would be better than deleting it.
Okay.
So I was going to say also, I kind of agree with you, Jason, that the ADA standard is 36 inches. And if we had like a 10-foot section of 36-inch wide sidewalk down here, it would be quite the bottleneck. So I don't think the legal standards are enough. So I want something in there. I just don't know if that's the right wording.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. We can definitely work on that.
A simple solution could just be to put and/or substantial obstruction of public movement.
Yeah. Well, and
That gives enough.
Dylan, I think that you and I should have an offline conversation about this, because my interest here, generally speaking, is creating because this will be a code standard, is in creating a code standard that that the commission, that is, as the Historic Design Review Board, can apply and have it stick. I think this is, So I think we'll work on it. We can remind me, Chair, if I forget, when we get to the end of this, to have a conversation with the commission about how to approach changes to this. There's a couple ways to deal with that we can discuss, but I don't want to get in the middle of going through the rest of this yet.
Okay, but the commission's consensus is to reword it so that we have that teeth that make it to clarify. Okay. Next section. Commissioner Aliff, you've got your hand up.
Next section, page 3, all caps shall. I don't think this having it all caps was intentional.
No.
That was it.
Easy fix.
Okay, I have it noted. Thank you.
So just a comment, we do talk about like service and loading areas, on-street loading, and we say whenever practical or when possible, and it sounds, you know, really loose. Are we okay with that? Is there any way to make that stronger, or is that the words we have to use there in 1 and 2?
Well, the fundamental issue is that we absolutely want to see these things, the consolidation, the screening, and everything, and we have preferences on where to put them, you know, preferably, you know, and it details that. The issue is that it's not actually possible in every site. And so we need to provide for essentially some kind of out or some flexibility for those cases where it's simply not going to be possible. The trick becomes, yeah, as you're pointing out, you can't make it so you can't add so many qualifiers that it loses its meaning and becomes just an easy, you know, somebody can just come in and say, oh, it's not possible because it's too hard, you know, and we just don't feel like it. That's obviously not getting to our intent,
well,
but the standard is what it is. So, but I think my suggestion here is adding some language. Can you scroll down a bit, Dylan? You know, saying, so for example, location and size, number 5, location and size shall be located at the rear of the building, located in alleys when possible. If a rear location is not feasible as determined by the Historic Design Review Board, which puts the onus on the board to make the decision, and you can listen to an applicant or city staff for that matter, and then decide for yourselves, is this feasible or not?
Okay, but could we not just say, and I'm thinking, I want to do in that area too, is, so one I was looking at, if we say service and loading areas among users or needs should be shared, consolidated, period. On-street loading, let me finish, on-street loading shall be used to meet some or all the loading and service needs, period. Then after that, maybe you say waivers required if, you know, if existing structures are needed or existing structures make it practical. Then you say, this is the code and you got to get a waiver if it is impractical.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
So,
and that way we kind of took a firm stance on, you got to do this. And if you want to do something different, because it's not practical or not possible, then you got to get a waiver.
So Dylan, what we would do functionally here is, so you would delete the wherever practical, as the chair just said. And then in other areas of this subsection D here, we would find similar language and take it out. And then what we'll do is we'll add a new, I don't know what number it'd be, a new section toward the bottom of that. So this would be, was it number 7, I guess? That would say the board may, the board may waive or alter these requirements in its sole discretion.
If elements of the
To
code are
accommodate
impractical,
site constraints or something. We can find some wording for it.
well, yeah, I mean, something like if elements of this code are impractical or not possible, then the design review board will consider waivers, something like that. I mean, that way it's in there. They know that there are waivers. It's not hard and fast, but when they read it, it's like you should do this, not you should try really hard, but doggone it, you should do this.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we can work on that.
Okay.
I have some ideas for how to write
Okay.
that up. So
Commissioners agree on that? Okay. Yeah, this is really the meat of a lot of discussion. So every place we see the when possible, and we're going to take that approach, right?
it seems to be the consensus, and just in my quick read, as we're kind of thinking through it, I'm noticing a few points and moments where it's gonna kind of shift the language up a bit for sure. Almost all throughout this entire section, there's qualifier commas followed by qualifiers all over. So
yeah, and the point isn't that it's inflexible. The point is that it's the code, and that waivers need to be considered very carefully. That way, that way it's got a little bit of teeth to it.
Right.
I think what I'll do, and this is just a guesstimate on my thinking on how I'm going to work through this, is to look at when we use concepts of waivers in the code currently and see how applicable they would be to, retool them to fit this section. Okay. And bring that to the table. And I'll read some other options too. I know there's quite a few ways to play through this. So
okay, Commissioner Tessman.
Yes, I mean, maybe there's a easier solution already present, right? And so I'm looking at section D. It looks like item 6.4, and actually, I guess maybe that just applies just to screening. But you have the sentence: a design screening theme system may be required and be maintained at the discretion of the community development director. I guess if there's a way to maybe preface section D or close section D with that language so basically we could tighten up everything that precedes the end there in section D and just make it shall, and then you've got basically a redress mechanism at the very end, just to keep it simple and flowing. I don't know. Because I'm assuming that 6.4 is specifically just for 6, but basically you're touching on an exemption process that could be applied across the whole code for that whole section.
Yeah.
Some is at the discretion of the community development director, and some would be at the discretion of the design review board as performed by the planning commission. But
there's also, I can point out for reference that there's already a provision that allows essentially variances from the historic design standards that's in the code. Dylan, I don't know if you can pull it up. It's 1735-150 subsection C.
Before you do that, Commissioner Lambert's had his hand up through this discussion. Commissioner Lambert, do you have something to add?
Oh, I was just going to say, I work with codes a lot, and having things, written out to where where they're saying, as long as they're feasible, that always puts the onus back on the building owner to make the case that they cannot do that standard. And so the historical design review board would still have those teeth, that teeth that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is I am channeling the city attorney a little bit here, who in generally speaking is in favor of clear clear standards that there's not really obvious wiggle room from. Which is not a bad thing generally. Recognizing that when it comes to design review, not everything is necessarily set in stone, and some flexibility or ability to work with applicants on these projects is needed. So you don't necessarily want to lock yourself into something that's overly strict
Right,
just to
right.
make the code ironclad.
Perhaps,
But
perhaps consistent phraseology then, because I mean, on D1, it's like wherever practical. On street, what was it say? Use when possible. And then before you had it like when feasible. And that, it just seemed like every sentence had a wiggle word that was different than the other one. And that's what I was thinking, it needs to be, I'd like it to do what we want it to do, right? To make Front Street look, look better, right? And make these things look well. So I just was concerned that it seemed like in every sentence, it seemed like a best effort. It's not a, you should do this.
right, I guess one of the things I would point out is if we made the feasibility argument for all things under section D, like if you go to number 3, waste enclosures and receptacles shall be designed to discourage wildlife access. Do we want to make that something that someone could get a variance for later on? Like that is obviously like they always have to do that in some way, right? Versus the location. And so are the I think you were pointing out where was the feasibility one?
Well, that's the difference between shall and should, right?
Right.
Yeah, because the one below that says should. Where's the feasibility one? Yeah, number 5, if relocation is not feasible, then facilities may be placed along the building side. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's worded clearly, actually, the way that's worded there. So I'd like to tighten up the qualifiers without it being, with it still being apparent that there is a corrective mechanism in the things that are should. In the shall, like the wildlife access, I mean, they got to do it. Does that make sense? Dylan and Jason, that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. We'll have to go back and take a close look at this, I think, but that makes sense.
And I think it's pretty close. I mean, I don't want to take away from the work there because I think it's pretty close. It's just, this is so much the meat of months of discussion with at least 2, maybe 3 different planning commission, I mean, all is kind of right there. I think it's important that we actually make a dent in what we're trying to do here. Okay.
Based on, sorry,
Go ahead.
go ahead. I was just going to say that if it works, Jason and I can kind of confer on the best strategies and best practices for how to correct this section and either bring about a retooled qualifications list that is more strongly worded, so to speak, or a potential variance option. Should we just figure out which one we think best fits this application and bring that back?
Yeah, that would work for the should items. Obviously, there's a couple of shall items like the wildlife access, but the should items, yeah, I think that would be, I think it would work.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else from the commission or the staff on section D? And again, I think this is, a lot of work. So I appreciate the work that was put in there. I don't want to, throw stones against it, except for it is so important. Let's just take another pass at it. Okay. Hearing nothing more, let's move on. Okay, so you've got the downtown master plan, the vision plan. Okay. I think we're very close on this historic downtown relook. Any comments on any of the sections we covered or the end here? Any of the commissioners? No? Well, again, I think we're very close. I know there's been a lot of work and I appreciate the cleanup that you've done, Dylan and Jason, on really making this readable and workable. So I think we're almost there. I think we can get there quickly. So what would you prefer, staff? Would you prefer that we approved on the conditions that the changes are made? Because I'd actually prefer to just take one last look at the changes as written before we take it for a vote, if that.
Right, and that was ultimately my question, Chair. Thank you for the reminder. Is for certain things that are I would say more minor in scope, one thing we could do is let the commission take a vote and specify that the changes as discussed would be approved by the chair prior to it going on. I think the number of changes we need to make are substantive enough. We should bring this back for the commission to re-review in 2 weeks.
I agree. And
So
I think
we'll proceed that way.
Yeah, we're very close here, very close.
Yeah.
And then, Jason, did you want further discussion on the obstruction comment, or are you just talking about the general code?
No, what I just stated about how to approach it was
Okay.
what I was intending. I think the obstruction thing was something that perhaps we could have wordsmithed and then gotten your approval, Chair, if the commission was amenable to that. But there's enough other things to do that I don't think that's a good approach.
Okay, that makes sense.
In this light.
And any other questions from us on the intent here? Again, the intent is that this thing, involves a change in action and appearance, with enough teeth that we can go ahead and enforce it, but yet allows it enough flexibility for folks to actually do their business. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay then, good. Well, that's good. That's a nice piece of work, staff. Really appreciate it. So now why don't we move on to the item number 3, comprehensive plan docket.
All right, that one
I
is.
think we need to close the public hearing, Jason. Sorry.
I thought we did that. Well,
Yeah,
maybe
on
as a
this
procedural, why
one,
don't we
yeah,
have the chair close the public
No,
hearing?
no, and this one I did it at 8:09. I did.
Yeah, you did close it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. We're just trying to make sure we don't want to have a public hearing going on forever here.
We opened at 8:08. We closed at 8:09 formally. And thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for keeping us on the straight and narrow there.
All right. So the next one up is the comprehensive plan docket items. And if you would like, I can give a brief overview and then you can take public comment, or you could take public comment prior to my discussion. See if either of the attendees want to offer anything. That's up to you as chair.
Yeah, and this is just public comment, or is this another for public hearing?
This is just public comment. I'll get to. I was going to get to it later, but there is a public hearing that we've noticed for 2 weeks from today, or tonight rather, for the comprehensive plan docket. So that would be all 3 of the requested amendments. On tonight's agenda, we just have 2 of them to discuss, and it's for discussion only. There's no action anticipated.
Okay, then yeah, I would like to open these 2 up. As I see that Richard Scheel is actually proposed these, so I would like to open this up to public docket prior to our discussion.
Sure.
I see Richard still has a hand up. Can we get him to?
Yep, he can unmute now.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I'd just like to address these 2 items which I had proposed. I've read through Jason Rogers' write-up on it. And I see that both he proposes that these should be delayed to be handled in the major update of the comprehensive plan that's a couple of years out. So I'd like to comment in that regard. First of all, on the first one, as far as balancing job types with housing types, and as he points out in his memo, some parts of the comprehensive plan sort of allude to it a bit, and other parts of the comprehensive plan talk more just in terms of maybe the quantity of jobs and the quantity of housing would be in balance, but they make no reference to balancing the types of them so that those homes can be affordable by the people who have those jobs. So I would like to point out that the city is not just out of balance, it is grossly out of balance. There are very few jobs in the city that pay enough for people to afford to live in most of the homes in the city. There are some low-end apartments that a few people can afford. There is the panorama apartments that some people can afford, although even those are not typically able to be afforded by, say, a grocery store clerk, a barber, people in those sorts of jobs, and certainly not people who say, do house cleaning at the hotel or something like that. And so I feel that waiting till the next major comprehensive plan update will just continue this pattern of approving new businesses coming in that pay low-wage jobs while approving housing development that is at the high price points of $600,000, $1 million, $1.5 million per housing unit. So I feel it's important to put a stake in the ground as rapidly as possible to turn this around and try to not only try to get an equal balance going forward, but to have a corrective balance where we, for a while until the housing balance and job balance in the city is more workable, to where school teachers and police officers and such can afford to live in the city, that we've approved virtually nothing but low-income housing, and we approve virtually nothing but high-income jobs, and that we not allow this imbalance to continue. And if the administration and the Planning Commission feel that the existing comprehensive plan language is sufficient as is, then that means the city has been basically disobeying its own comprehensive plan for a decade or two because of the massive degree to which these are out of balance. And then with regard to the growth targets versus minimums, again, I think the city has been, over the last decade or more, the city has been pushing relentlessly at the PSRC, the Regional Planning Commission, to state that these are minimums and not targets. The Regional Planning Commission has pushed back, saying, no, these are targets. A target is what you aim for. A target, you don't say, take a target and then say, oh, well, if regional planning says it makes sense to have us have a certain population, then we ought to aim way above it. That is what we have been doing for the last decade or more. We have far exceeded what PSRC wanted us to have. They have chastised the city for that. They have, in their most recent updated things, they've seen we have the people in the city that we have. They have said you can't move people out of the city to try to correct it. So they have raised those targets, I see in the report here. But let's not continue this pattern of take a target that has already been adjusted to meet our overgrowth and then aim for, again, way above it. Let's treat them as real targets that we aim for. You'll always be a little above, a little below, but let's aim for those and not keep aiming for way above. I think this really is not reflecting the will of the people of the city. I think if you were able to somehow survey the vast majority of the residents of this city and ask them, do you think we should grow from 14,000 to 20,000 or something? Most of them would say, no, that's terrible. I moved here because I wanted a small city, a city that feels nice to me, not a big crowded city. And yet we've had an administration in the past that has relentlessly pushed for a bigger city. We don't want that. I think, again, the past administration has always claimed that they were doing what the people wanted, but they had nothing backing that up. I have never, ever talked to one person in the city who has ever said they want it to be a bigger city. I've heard lots of people who say it's already growing too much, but let's keep it as it is. Let's stay with the targets. Let's not keep this relentless overgrowth. And so I again suggest that we correct this. Let's not set ourselves up for another repeat. Now that we've got a larger target, let's not repeat the pattern of way overshooting that target. let's make it very clear in the city's primary directive plan, which is the comprehensive plan, that the city shall be aiming for the targets. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comments? Hearing none, let's dive in.
All right, so I'm not going to screen share here because it's just text. I can certainly put things up if there's a desire to do so. So just starting with a brief overview here, the city runs an annual comprehensive plan docketing process, which is to comply with the Growth Management Act. The city's docketing year, so to speak, runs from November 1st to October 31st. And so the city solicited requests for amendments to the comprehensive plan and the development codes in September, October. We received 5 requests from Mr. Scheel. 3 of them addressed the comprehensive plan, 2 of them addressed the city code. Mr. Scheel withdrew the 2 code requests because they were not to amend development regulations, they were to amend other parts of the code. And so those need to be addressed in a different manner, essentially directly through the city council. What we're left with are the 3 requests to amend the comprehensive plan. The commission discussed the first one a little over a month ago, and tonight we have numbers 2 and 3, and you heard Mr. Scheel describe them in his comments, so I won't need to rehash that too much. Speaking specifically to number 2 now, the request was to balance job types with housing types, and you heard Mr. Scheel's description of, affordable housing versus, market rate or even, very high-end market rate housing relative to the types of jobs Snoqualmie has been adding recently. The memo talks about the policies that are currently in the comprehensive plan, and they're located in a couple of different places. There are some policies that address the land use element, speaking to it as the plan says, a balanced mix and arrangement of land uses, and also speaks to a mix of housing types that and this is a quote, that match jobs in the city and promote housing diversity. Then you have the economic development element number 3, which talks about the city's overall jobs housing balance, but doesn't speak to matching housing types and job types. That element also has an appendix which talks about some recommended target industry clusters to go for to further the city's economic development. The memo notes that these clusters that the appendix discusses would generally align with the type of housing stock built in Snoqualmie over the last 20 years. Looking at what kind of employment growth this city has had over the last 5 or 6 years, using the covered employment data from the Puget Sound Regional Council, shows that this city added a significant number of jobs, from about 3,300 jobs in 2015 up to just over 5,500 jobs in 2020. The number is likely higher by now, of course. It's important to note covered employment is only employment that is, as a saying, covered by the State Unemployment Insurance Act, and their PSRC's data source for this is from the State Employment Security Department. And so only those jobs that are subject to the Unemployment Insurance Act are reported to ESD. So it's going to exclude the self-employed, proprietors, some certain corporate officers, military personnel would be the biggest examples there. So PSRC and ESD have made some estimates that it accounts for about 85 to 90% of total employment. So you can, of course, adjust the numbers upward a little bit to compensate, but the covered employment data is consistent year to year. PSRC has been conducting this, or rather gathering this data for a number of years, so it's useful for making comparisons across multiple years. What we're seeing recently is that certainly a significant amount of the job growth in Snoqualmie has been in service industries, 41% of that growth, with manufacturing, government, and education accounting for combined a similar percentage there. And the balance is various other industries. Over the same time, the city's population has grown by just over 1,000 people, from just over 13,000 people to just over 14,000 people. So you can see we added a large number of jobs and not very many residents. What that time frame hides to an extent is that the city grew in population enormously in the decade prior to that and did not add so many jobs. What we've seen is the build out of the Snoqualmie Ridge Business Park, for example, which added a very, very large number of jobs, and a continued build out of some of the retail and service areas of Snoqualmie Ridge, while we were building a significant number of housing units in the decade before, finishing Snoqualmie Ridge 1, starting in on Snoqualmie Ridge 2. And so, to really get a complete picture, we would probably have to go very far back and look at essentially the Snoqualmie Ridge plans. All that said, the city's overall jobs housing balance is relatively close to 1.0 right now, which is to say jobs match housing, broadly speaking. Prior to that, Snoqualmie, because we added a significant number of housing units and not very many jobs, was a bedroom community. And so that has certainly changed over time. This is a relatively normal growth pattern for communities with these master planned developments. We saw a similar effect in Issaquah with Issaquah Highlands, where the vast majority of the development in Issaquah Highlands was residential, and only at the tail end of the development of Issaquah Highlands did they get a significant amount of commercial development. And even then, they didn't get as much as they thought due to essentially changes in the commercial real estate market over the 20-year build-out period. Redmond Ridge was the same way. They built all the housing first, and only toward the tail end did the commercial development come in. So in that regard, Snoqualmie is not unique in facing this particular issue. Where it certainly arises, and we see this in traffic every day, is that because of the number of service jobs we've added, the people who work in those jobs are coming in over Highway 18, for example, or they're coming from elsewhere in the Snoqualmie Valley. Because as Mr. Shield does, correctly notes, the houses here don't necessarily lend themselves to, the Starbucks barista or some of our school teachers, for example, living in Snoqualmie or in the immediate surrounding area. They're coming in from Southeast King County, for example. So big issue here. I think where staff's opinion is on this one is looking forward over the next couple of years, what we have in the pipeline for growth is very little housing that's not effectively already entitled. So there would be build out of Snoqualmie Ridge 2. There's only a couple of development parcels left there, and those are, for lack of a better terminology, pretty much locked in because of the entitlements in place for Snoqualmie Ridge 2. So that would be the S21B parcel next to the hospital, which is intended for commercial development. And then there is a vacant parcel at the base of the hill on Jacobia, which was originally intended for a Latter-day Saints church that we anticipate will be developed here in the next year or so, likely as a residential development. And that's really, and that will complete the build out of Snoqualmie Ridge 2. Snoqualmie Ridge 1 at this point is largely complete. The business park is built out, all the residential is built out, just a few things here and there that we're still working on. And that's it for the major development on Snoqualmie Ridge. Obviously across the river, we're looking at the mill site, which is in the entitlement process right now, and quite frankly, would not be affected by any change we make to the code or the comprehensive plan, even if we made it today. That's baked in. That's pretty baked in under the way the permitting process works in Washington State. Certainly, the council could opt to reject that project, which would of course reset things. But point being, no matter what we do here tonight, isn't going to affect the mill site. So from that perspective, a lot of what I am arguing here is that there's no need to rush into a precipitous change now when we have a major comprehensive plan update coming that's due in 2 years, when we're already in the middle of doing a housing needs study in conjunction with the Valley cities, when the council has shown a commitment to looking at affordable and workforce housing. As Mr. Shield pointed out, even Panorama Apartments can be out of reach for some people, and he's not wrong, because the King County median income is so high now that even for a single person, 80% of the median income is $63,000, which is crazy. So to a certain extent, what we're seeing with affordable housing is that it's being driven by the very, very high incomes in King County. And even what is nominally affordable housing at the 80% level isn't, it's affordable by the definition, but it's not necessarily affordable to an actual person out there in one of those jobs. That's a big picture issue that isn't going to necessarily be solved by Snoqualmie alone. It's something we need to work on, and that we are working on, frankly, at the regional level. King County is about to undertake a further process following the growth target allocation that was ratified by the city council back a couple months ago, to look at, well, what are the affordable housing needs of the region and how should they be allocated? That's something that's going to take another roughly year or so to really shake out. Until we have that information, it's somewhat premature to be making adjustments to our own comprehensive plan. We don't even know what we're going to need to deal with. So all that to say, I'm not denying that there is a major issue here and that we need to address it. My issue is one of timing. And making a change now isn't going to materially affect any future development, because the next future development that would coming would frankly be some kind of major annexation of one of the annexation areas. And those are going to take many multiple years to work their way through the process because of the nature of annexations and the nature of the city process involved in annexations.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Yeah, I'd actually like to share a couple of thoughts as well, and I appreciate the passion around this issue. I do remember early on, and I think it was in the Economic Development Commission, even before the Planning Commission, when Panorama was being discussed, and then early on the Planning Commission, there was real concern about the height of that it was going to be, and there certainly was also discussion on, could you take some of these units and keep them for our first responders? The answer was no. King County, helps pay for it. Therefore, it has to follow their rules. So our purview was really prescribed on exactly what we could and couldn't do at that time. Secondly, again, just as a conversation piece, we, prior to the Snoqualmie tribe purchasing that land that was for the Salish development, we had a real long discussion, even a public hearing, on what that was going to look like. And again, there was a discussion on how do you make sure, if you build an affordable house in a new development, that it stays that way. Because I walk around Ridge 1, Ridge 2, and you'll see single family homes on one side and townhouses on the other side. But those townhouses have appreciated so much that, like you said, nobody could easily afford those, let alone the Panorama Apartments or others. So, and there was also maybe it was a housing needs thing pre-pandemic that I attended that talked about the massive shortage of housing, period, in the area, which is one reason why, one reason why the appreciation is just like crazy here. So I don't know if we have a feel for that right now, but I think our purview and ability to impact this it's almost symbolic at this point of, we can say we want more affordable housing, but we need some help on figuring out what that looks like, because right now anything we build, and again, Panorama was supposed to be it. It wasn't that long ago. It goes into a realm that is, you almost need to, graduate with a master's degree and work for Microsoft just to rent that apartment if you're a new employee. So, I hear the desire, and I've heard so many, offsites talk about it, and even attend some council retreats to talk about it. But I think we need some state and county help to figure out how to get there. So, is there any feedback from the county or state on affordable housing? Because it's a much bigger problem than here. I just heard recently that Bellevue is the most expensive area in the country, even more than Manhattan Island. So it's not like, it's not like there's not a desire to do that, but there's just a housing shortage. I mean, what can the state and county help us with this, wrestling with this problem as we consider this docket item?
To a certain extent, the state especially has started to provide some more direct support than they have in the past. You'll recall the council discussed over the last couple of years, a couple of, there is a sales tax increment that the city takes that provides a certain amount of funding per year that the city could spend on various affordable housing or supportive housing needs. The city currently contracts with a couple of service providers using some of that money, not all of it. So that's one thing that is a new tool that we didn't have a couple of years ago. That said, a big part of the problem here, as you've noted, Chair, is the sheer scale of the problem, and that little amounts of money like that, while helpful and well-intentioned, ultimately aren't going to get us there, because it's not always obvious when we're sitting in meetings like this, but development is very expensive. These are, Panorama Apartments was a multi-million-dollar project by that developer. And it's not to say that governments can't or shouldn't build their own housing, because we have certainly done so in the past, and we will continue to do so going forward. But there's always pressure on taxes and what government is spending its money on that has to get worked into the picture. So in that regard, having some dedicated funding sources is helpful, because we couldn't, for example, it doesn't come down to a debate over, do we want to fund our police or do we want to fund affordable housing, which is not a real discussion, by the way. That's just I'm making a point here. But so some tools are in place. King County has also started in on some additional programs, somewhat focused on the unhoused or the homeless population. Of course, you've seen in the news, they've been buying these older hotels and converting them into supportive housing. That is another, that's another part of this discussion, is that the need for that kind of housing is absolutely there, because our unhoused population has been getting larger and larger over the last, since forever, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. So I think those are the things we've seen recently, and I think there's frankly still more to come.
Yeah, Commissioner Goodman, I see your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a really good discussion. I did want to come back to one point that Jason was making, which it seems to me like most of this discussion is sort of moot, given that Snoqualmie Ridge, the development plan has been baked since it began. And to tie that to the point that was just being made, I mean, not only is development very expensive, but it happens at a relatively slow pace. And the situation at the beginning when they're starting the process and at the end in terms of the local housing market could be completely different. I live in a cottage style, one of the cottage style here, which presumably I would guess when this development started was meant for folks with a bit lower household income. I mean, I look at the records and these things sold for like 150K, 200K maybe, and now they're going for triple that. And there's nothing, it's just sort of, Snoqualmie, each individual jurisdiction only has so much they can do to address that situation, aside from, public, housing authority owned properties, or, properties owned by developers who specifically work in with affordable housing credits and all of that. Besides those two things, there's very little left of what I've heard termed as naturally affordable housing, which is housing that is not deeded to serve a certain income level, but is affordable nonetheless. That's really disappearing, and that is, I think, is where the real gap is, because there's only so many income restricted units to go around. So all that is to say, I'm very sensitive to the types of issues that are being brought up here in terms of the housing and jobs balance. It's not something that's unique to Snoqualmie. We're part of, we're part of a region. It's a regional thing, and that's part of the reason why it's complicated, is because it affects everybody, but nobody individually seems to be in charge of it. I do think for this particular case, it sounds like most of the future housing growth and jobs growth is sort of already baked in existing plans. So I would agree that the time to discuss that would probably be at a time when we're talking about annexation, like Jason said, or where otherwise we're breaking new ground rather than just kind of filling in where we've already decided the growth is going to go. So while all that is to say, I'm certainly sensitive to the issue, but I think in terms of bang for our buck, I don't know that we're going to get much out of it at this point, but I do think certainly worth talking about later.
And it might make sense symbolically to say we do desire to do this, but I do believe there are some policy things that would need to change to enable it. And I'll just throw out an example, and then I'll yield the floor. But pre-pandemic, I attended a debate, and it was pretty intriguing. And I've done a lot of travel and business where other countries in Asia and others, they'll basically set up dormitories. And that means you've got a room that's got your bed, and you've got a shared bathroom, and you've got a shared kitchen, for example. And you can really do affordable housing quickly when you do that. And apparently that used to be something that was, was open here as kind of starter thing, dormitories, and again, shared facility stuff that apparently we can't build here. And the debate kind of just wandered off into, well, we don't have the policy to go do that. We're not going to pursue that. But I'm not suggesting that is the answer, but something like that, I think something very different than we're doing would be required to actually address the issue. So, Commissioner Goodman?
Yeah, I did want to, that's a great point. I did some planning work in White Center not too long ago, and they came up with the same problem, which is, another issue is that the type of housing that would be affordable, we're not allowed to build because of the existing zoning code.
Right.
In White Center, what they did was they developed what they called a demonstration project area, where they kind of set off a couple different blocks and said, somewhere, if somebody's interested, one of these parcels can be turned into a demonstration project. And the project was essentially what you're talking about, which was, communal kitchen, very, very small 200 square foot rooms. The idea being, let's kind of deconstruct what's making housing so expensive and maybe get rid of some of these features that do that. Of course, there was pushback in the community about that, but I do think thinking outside the box like that is one of the few ways that we can get at the shortage of affordable housing, without going into deeded housing and all that.
Yeah, and we saw this discussion play out to a certain extent in this year's legislative session. There was the most prominent bill was HB 1782, the one that would have put a state mandate to allow certain types of housing within certain distances of transit stations, and also set essentially a minimum density for cities of a certain size. The bill didn't pass for a variety of reasons, but the discussion was interesting because you do have a certain element of there are some interest groups out there who are pushing for just significantly increasing the housing supply, and they're not necessarily wrong that we need more housing of any and all types, but there's additional wrinkles in the housing market. We also strongly need certain types of housing. We need to be very sensitive to displacement issues. And then there are local control and community character things, as you heard from Commissioner Goodman, that get factored into this as well. So part of the reason that bill died was I think some pushback on the one size fits all-ish approach at a state level. But even though that bill died, it doesn't change the reality that we still, something needs to be done, and some of these strategies could certainly be helpful, but no one strategy is going to solve the problem.
Right. And just a final comment on we want more low workforce housing, and more higher paying jobs. Again, I was on the Economic Development Commission for a period of years, and yeah, you'd love nothing but software jobs and medical device and things like that, but that is market forces, that is location. You know, Space Labs was a big company that I know Snoqualmie was pretty excited to get, but I mean, we don't have a centrally planned way to make sure that high paid jobs get here, and incentives on that basis are problematic. So I don't know if that one could even be actually addressed. I think the best thing you can do is try to figure out how to get innovative on lower cost housing. Commissioner Aliff?
Just you kind of came around at the end, but I wanted to object to this idea that we could operate and run a community on just high wage jobs, because we can't run any community
Oh, no. Well,
on just high wage jobs. You need a mix. That's the only way to make this work.
Yeah, no, I agree. But
and we've
can't
definitely
even,
got the high end covered. I think we all agree on that.
well, you can't even wave your hand and put them in Snoqualmie. You know, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely true. To summarize the discussion to this point, I want to get to that. Pay for jobs in our community and housing for people holding those jobs are totally out of alignment. Traffic is worse as a consequence. It's like at the top of many people's lists. If we make any change now, it's not going to influence any future development, and any change at this point would be symbolic. I'm not opposed to making symbolic gestures. Like it's a bad problem. I agree. If it's not going to make any difference, we shouldn't make any change. But I also don't think that we should just sit here and do nothing.
Well, the advantage to a symbolic deal, and maybe again, we acknowledge the build outs are pretty much done. And we acknowledge that there's a comprehensive plan, is that we acknowledge that we have an imbalance and we would like it corrected, and we're limited in our ability to do that. And I think there's some value to doing that as a community. I mean, I'm open for other things, but I think there's some value to, even if we understand we can't do this right now, that at the very least we ought to say we should move in that direction.
I think
Go ahead.
to add some additional color here, a lot of ultimately where the discussion is going to be valuable is, you know, the next big development opportunity, so to speak, and we're going to have to address it in the context of the adopted growth targets, is going to be the annexation areas, especially Snoqualmie Hills. The annexation request from, I want to say about 5 years ago now, was for a largely senior housing community, and it was a substantial development proposal, and the city council at the time rejected it for a variety of reasons. One of which was being that the city had not had an opportunity to really go through and plan for what they wanted to see in Snoqualmie Hills. Everything had been focused on Snoqualmie Ridge, and then the focus beyond that was the Salish Lodge expansion and the mill site. So the city had not had the opportunity to go through that planning process, wasn't prepared for any kind of major development proposal on that property. And in the context of an annexation, the city council had full discretion to reject the annexation request for any reason or no reason, essentially, which they did. But the time to start discussing what are we going to do about Snoqualmie Hills is now. And all these things we've talked about are critical components of that discussion, you know, because what do we need? We need a lot of workforce housing. We need some, you know, we also need to consider adding some additional really high-end jobs to account for the housing we've already got, as Mr. Shield said, and as Commissioner Aliff was helping summarize. So all those things factor into it. But part of, I think you're hearing staff's hesitation is we don't even have all the information we need. Like I said, we're conducting a housing needs assessment right now. And so could we make a symbolic change? Yes, we could, but it's important to remember that it's not necessarily symbolic, because the comprehensive plan is in fact the city's blueprint for growth. And we do need to be cautious of not making a change for change's sake, and doing so on the basis of, you know, incomplete information, or at least, you know, not getting enough information to feel like we can make an informed decision on this. I think that time will definitely come. That's what we're aiming for. That's the whole point of the major, you know, that's why we're starting a comprehensive plan update process 2 years before it's due, because we don't want to suddenly get to, you know, April 2024 and say, oh no, we've got to figure this out right now. That's not a position anybody wants to be in. So this will not be the final word on this subject by far.
From a process check, Jason, what is the, I'm looking at the schedule. So we're going to have a public hearing in 2 weeks on these docket items. Is that what the plan is?
Correct. The city's code mandates that the planning commission hold a public hearing prior to making its recommendation to the city council on the requested amendments. And so the public hearing is in 2 weeks. We'll be asking the commission to make a recommendation to the council in 2 weeks as well. Unfortunately, due to some staff time constraints, I had to pull this off the agenda the last couple of meetings, so I apologize for that. And then it will go to the city council for their decision on these amendments.
Yeah. I appreciate the data. And if I could ask, we have Councilman Johnson here. I mean, you've had the council retreat or discussion. Was there discussion specific to affordable housing that would add to what our consideration at this point?
In general, I think that what's been discussed tonight has kind of circled around the concerns of the council as well. So I don't have anything significant to add to the discussion at this point. Plus, we did speak in somewhat broad terms, so I don't want to speak beyond beyond what we did and speak for the council with my own lens, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think the idea is that we would like to see additional housing, especially on the more affordable range. But the specifics, I think, are still to be determined.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and a number of programs that Mr. Rogers talked about are definitely things we're considering. I believe that the council already approved the sales tax that he referenced. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the data. I do think we've had a good discussion. So can I understand the desire right now on, as this is written, of what the desire, what the request is from the staff to the commission at this point?
Well, so for tonight, this is a discussion item, and so you see at the tail end of that section, the city administration recommends requested amendment number 2 not be adopted at this time. So we're asking the planning commission to recommend to the city council that it not be adopted at this time. The following sentence there about this conversation continuing is more of a planning note, and as you heard tonight, we're certainly going to continue that conversation as part of the comprehensive plan update over the next couple of years. So while the recommendation is not to amend the comprehensive plan at this time, as I've said, this is certainly not, this is in many respects the beginning of the conversation and not the end.
So help me understand, how does that square with the time to talk about Snoqualmie Hills is now?
The time to talk about Snoqualmie Hills is now is through the comprehensive plan update cycle that's coming up. We're going to have some major, policy level decisions about what would that annexation look like in broad terms. Certainly, if and when we get an annexation proposal, there will be a more intensive process. That they'll have to do pre-annexation zoning, they'll have to do an annexation implementation plan, and all those things. But those items get informed by the comprehensive plan changes that we are likely going to be talking about over the next couple of years. And the mill site, for example, has gone through the same process. The city went through an extensive planning process for the mill site, starting with its original comprehensive plan in 1994, carrying on for the next 15 plus years until the site was actually annexed in 2011. And there were policies in the comprehensive plan at that time that informed the pre-annexation zoning, that informed the annexation implementation plan that were adopted as part of that annexation. So we certainly have precedent for the process and how it works, but I think you can also look and see what the potential timeframes are here for, we have to do the planning now, and then it might get annexed in probably no sooner than 5 years, and more likely in the 5 to 10 year range. And then you go through some additional, more specific planning, and then you start, and then there's going to be a major, entitlement process to actually permit things, and only then does it start getting built. So we're realistically looking at a 10 to 20 year time frame for actually building out there, which fits with the time horizon of the comprehensive plan. It's a 20-year plan.
And Snoqualmie Hills, you're basically saying by the time we get to the point of building anything, the comprehensive plan, which is going to be updated within 2 years, that's where you want to put it, because by the time we build anything, that's the plan that's going to be in effect. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah. By the time we get into an actual annexation process, the plan that we're going to work on over the next 2 years and adopt is likely going to be the one we're working from for that annexation process. So that's really going to drive a lot of the decisions. And it's not that you can't change course a little bit over, and that's certainly the intent behind the periodic updates of the comprehensive plan, but to make, you can liken it to, the giant ocean liner. You throw the wheel over and the boat starts turning very slowly. So yes, you can change the course, but it takes a while. So what we're trying to do is we haven't even started turning the ship yet. We're trying to decide, do we want to go left or right, or however you want to term it.
All right. Well, at the very least, I think we do request as much understanding as we can of what the state and county are doing, because I got to believe the appreciation that Commissioner Goodman talked about, we've all felt it. We've all seen our neighbors go. I'm getting queries, like weekly or monthly of, hey, do you want to sell your house? And it's disruptive. The appreciation is not, first you're kind of excited about it, but it's, it's California-esque right now, and not in a good way. So I don't think anybody anticipated that. And I do think the state and the county could help us out on giving us some tools of how to deal with this, because it's a different situation right now.
Right.
So that is a request. If we could, anyway, if there's anything immediate, which I believe the city and the council are talking about, that we could hear about it.
Yeah. And to add to what Councilmember Johnson was saying, the chair of the Community Development Committee, Councilmember Lassay, did note specifically at the retreat that he would like the CD committee to, come up with a work plan and start focusing on affordable housing, hopefully starting later this summer. So there's absolutely desire to do so, and we're certainly going to hear a lot more.
Okay. See, Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, I wanted to add another thing, just building off of that last point there, that was discussed. I can't remember if it was Councilmember Lassay or Councilmember Mayhew who suggested it, but the possibility of even, because it's so important to the council, perhaps even forming a whole subcommittee of the council specifically dedicated to affordable housing, because the Community Development Committee already has enough to do. And this is a big topic that could absorb all of our time, since I'm also on that committee. So that hasn't been decided, but that idea is currently floating out there and was broadly discussed at our retreat.
Thank you. Well, we definitely got our teeth into a real issue, but okay. Well, good. Well, anything else from a discussion of the commissioners? Okay, I think we've had a good discussion. Definitely, I think everybody feels this. I think everybody has some element of passion around this as well. So, okay.
All right, and then the third request amendment after weird transition there is about growth targets, and you heard Mr. Shields' description of why he's requested this. The memo goes into a fair amount of detail as to the legal reasoning behind the growth targets, but at the end of the day, the discussion ultimately centers very similarly on the discussion about affordable housing, in that the city has its growth targets assigned, which the city council has ratified, and so it is now this city's responsibility to figure out how to accommodate that, and whether I'm sorry. It's the new target, the 2044 target is 1,500 new housing units and 4,425 jobs. The target that target was negotiated by Snoqualmie with all the other cities in King County. So we were certainly not unaware of what the target was going to be. That target is designed to accommodate all of the projected growth in the city and its potential annexation areas. So that includes largely Snoqualmie Hills. It would result in what we would, broadly speaking, term build out of Snoqualmie as the plans, both at the King County level and at the local level, currently envisioned for Snoqualmie. Any further growth would require additional annexation areas or a major rethinking of what Snoqualmie looks like. So so that's kind of the general background on the targets. Whether the city is going to plan to exceed the targets or broadly speaking meet the targets is ultimately a policy question for the city council. And we've seen it. It's not just Snoqualmie. It's been other cities. Some of the Southeast King County cities were in the same boat as Snoqualmie. Covington, Maple Valley, Black Diamond, for example, were all in a similar boat in the last comprehensive plan update cycle, where the Puget Sound Regional Council said, well, you're growing so fast, you're exceeding your targets. And that got the PSRC into the big discussion about what the targets really are. PSRC was attempting, for various reasons, to treat them as caps, as limits. And a lot of the discussion revolved around, well, where do the targets come from? And the answer is they come from the process laid out in the Growth Management Act, where the state, in this case, the State Office of Financial Management, makes population projections going forward 20 years and distills those down into housing unit requirements. And those get divided up amongst the 39 counties. And each county then can have its own process for how those countywide targets get distributed amongst the member jurisdictions. So at a very high level, the King County was in a position where the state is telling us, per state law, well, this is what you have to plan for, minimum. And there's nothing in it that says whether it's Snoqualmie or King County as a whole, couldn't plan for more. We could have taken a hypothetical 250,000 unit target set at the county level and said, yeah, every city is going to take that plus 10%, because that's what the Growth Management Planning Council, the King County Advisory Council, decided. That's not what happened, certainly. But there were a number of cities in King County that were planning and in fact got more growth than they were targeting. Snoqualmie was one of them. The Southeast King County cities I named were others. Redmond was one. Redmond was and is planning for growth in excess of its targets for a variety of reasons, which are different from Snoqualmie's. But this is not so unusual a situation. Part of the reason why Redmond, I'm not trying to pick on them, but just providing some context, part of the reason why Redmond wasn't such a target of the PSRC is because Redmond has 2 regional growth centers, as the term is. And now those are areas where both the county and the region have decided we're going to focus a lot of growth. Redmond has, 4 light rail stations that would go in those regional growth centers. So this is Overlake and then downtown Redmond. And so that was part of what's driving Redmond's growth, is they said, well, we're going to get light rail and we're going to plan for a whole bunch of growth in there over and above what we, strictly speaking, need to take. And for policy reasons, that's generally fine because they are getting light rail and so it's easier to accommodate those things because you have the transportation system to do it. Out here in Snoqualmie, part of the issue is that we don't really have the transportation system to accommodate all this growth. We've seen all the traffic over Highway 18. We've seen traffic grow on I-90. We've seen traffic grow on 202 and 203. And we don't have, frankly, mass transit options out here. We have the 208, which runs every couple of hours over to Issaquah. And we have, as great a job as Snoqualmie Valley Transportation does, it's not a large organization, and their service frequencies aren't so high that it provides a viable, I don't need a car alternative. to get people out, especially when they're trying to go these long distances to jobs or coming in from outside Snoqualmie from their homes to jobs here. So that was another big component of that conversation. All that said, like I said at the beginning, at the end of the day, this is something the council is going to have to figure out. And all the growth that was planned in the current comprehensive plan is already baked in. We've already had Snoqualmie Ridge essentially reach build out. We already, the mill site project is in entitlement right now, and certainly it could get denied or it could get approved, but nothing we do in the comprehensive plan is going to change any of that. So again, we come back to what from staff's perspective is what's important is looking forward to the next thing. Snoqualmie Hills, how are we going to deal with those 1,500 homes and 4,400 jobs that we have to plan for? Do we want to plan for more than that? I can't answer that question right now because I don't know I don't think the council has really grappled with that question, frankly, and they're not going to grapple with it for a while.
Can you explain those numbers, Jason?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So over the period 2024 to 2044, so the 20-year planning horizon of the comprehensive plan, this city is legally required to figure out how we could accommodate 1,500 homes and 4,425 jobs in the city. That's not to say that growth will actually happen for various, market reasons, or, there could be economic downturns, et cetera, that growth may not end up happening. And we've seen that over the last period of comprehensive plans where some cities, didn't meet their targets for various reasons. But the important thing is,
this comes from the county or the entire Puget Sound Regional Council?
The targets specifically are coming from the county.
Okay.
PSRC gets involved because PSRC is it's called the Metropolitan Planning Organization. It's the body that its primary purpose is to distribute federal transportation funding. And so in that regard, it is broadly speaking focused on transportation. This region, and when I say the PSRC region, I mean King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Kitsap counties have opted to use the PSRC as a broader regional planning organization to help coordinate the growth in the 4 counties. One of the important components that comes with all that is that PSRC has to certify all of the jurisdictions, the counties and the cities' comprehensive plans to make us eligible for federal transportation funding. And that's where the discussion came in. PSRC didn't want to certify Snoqualmie's and some other cities' plans, which would have made us ineligible for federal transportation grants or other funding on the basis of we were blowing past the growth targets. So that's PSRC's hammer, so to speak, is money. Beyond that, PSRC doesn't have, PSRC's legal authority is beyond that very, very vague because the targets are coming from King County ultimately through the Growth Management Planning Council. And our plan complies with the countywide planning policies, the King County countywide planning policies. Now, by practice, the King County countywide planning policies are in conformance with the regional planning policies that PSRC adopts as part of, in this case, Vision 2050, the 25-year or 30-year regional planning document that PSRC does. So practically speaking, there is a lot of coordination that occurs, from PSRC all the way down to the individual cities. But the discussion, and the former mayor was heavily involved in these discussions, is, well, what is PSRC's business here exactly when we're complying with what King County wants and what state law requires?
Okay, so in interest of just clarifying this, so the request for the docket item number 3 is that the 1,500 become a target, not a minimum. I mean, that's in simplest terms what that request is.
Yeah. From a practical standpoint here, though, I think so there are 2 practical issues in stake. One, under the current plan, the one adopted in 2014, it has the target built into it. We've basically already met that target, and the way we've met that target is through growth that's already programmed. So changing the policy of the current plan wouldn't would have absolutely no practical effect because we've already gone past the targets. So you could change the policy, you could change the plan, and it wouldn't make any difference. What we really need to be focused on are the new targets, the ones I just spoke of, the ones with the horizon year of
Right.
2024. And so again, this is
Oh, I
one
see what
where
you're saying. You're saying this item
I understand.
3 is for the next comprehensive plan for the 2044 target. That's what
Right.
you said before.
Yeah, and it's absolutely a discussion worth having because what the city plans for growth-wise has a huge effect on the city's policies going forward. You know, for everything from how we allocate our capital dollars to what we're planning. You know, how I'm spending a bunch of my time as, you know, certainly as the interim director now on planning initiatives. But that discussion is going to come as to, do we want to plan for 1,500 homes? You know, or hypothetically in Snoqualmie Hills West, do we want to plan for 2,000? And plan for 5,000? I mean, that's an extreme example, but that's part of the discussion we're going to have. And the affordable housing discussion you just had starts entering into this as to,
Right.
you know.
And actually, sorry, for Councilmember Johnson, maybe you can comment as well. The budget conversation comes in that as well. I mean, are we currently, if we just said we're done growing, is our budget sustainable, or does our budget require an amount of growth in the next 20 years? And if so, what is that requirement?
Glad it's you on the spot, not me.
The age-old question of.
Well, again, if it's too very a question, but
no, it's fine. It's it's that when we look at the budget, there are a few buckets we can look at. We can increase taxes, which there are limits on how you can do that and stuff. We can increase economic development, which would include levels of growth, or we can reduce levels of service. The problem is you cannot not do one or some combination of those things and have a sustainable budget. So what the council will have to do is essentially look at the priorities and say, hey, which of these 3 options do we want to go with, and to what degree? So there are types of development that are more financially sustainable than others. And again, I don't want to overstep what the intent is of the council that has been agreed to at this point. But I think that's just kind of a fact that I can lay on the table is the more units you have per area of land, the more revenue you can get in terms of property taxes and that sort of thing to help pay for the services. So that's kind of what goes into the calculus, and exactly how that looks and to what degree the council wants to go that route versus cutting services, I can't speak to, but I can at least lay out that those are the issues that we will be tasked with over the next year as we plan out the budget, which is only a 2-year budget. So, what happens in Snoqualmie Hills isn't going to affect us in the next 2 years. But that said, that's kind of the general way that we're going to be approaching things in within the next year as we plan for the biennial budget.
yeah, and we always wanted to not be as dependent on property taxes and be more focused on commercial. Have we moved the needle that way?
I can't say that we have done a substantial amount of movement. We don't have an outlet mall or something like that we have added to the city that has hugely shifted within the last year or so. Our main ways of generating revenue for the city. When you look at the breakdown, it sure looks like the vast majority of revenue for the city to cover our operating costs and our capital costs and that sort of thing is coming, at least if we look at non-utility stuff, is coming from property taxes. And that's just based on essentially the way that Snoqualmie Ridge was developed. That's just the route that was taken, for better or worse.
Yeah.
One effect we have seen over the last couple of years, which has helped, although it will not, if you want to call it, save us, is COVID has pushed a lot of shopping online, and because of that, our sales tax leakage rate has reduced a bit compared to what it was pre-COVID.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah, so like I said, that has helped because we are recovering, if you will, more sales tax revenue from our own citizens than pre-COVID. But at the end of the day, it's not going to, it is not, that effect is so far at least not big enough to prevent the council from having to make some interesting decisions over the next few
And
years.
it's hard to say how long that's going to last. You know, if the pandemic is in the process of ending, as we all hope that it is, it could be that people stop doing as much online shopping as they had done, and therefore we would have less revenue from that source. So it's not necessarily a sustainable change, even as small as it is.
And just as comparison, I've got an office in North Bend, so I've attended the COC meetings, and pre-pandemic, North Bend had a very different profile, I think due in large part because of those outlets, which I think historically is something that Snoqualmie never wanted as part of our character. So, you know, again, just to talk about this docket request, actually both of the requests, 2 and 3, it's not in isolation of the budget, and it's not in isolation of, do we want to change and add something like an outlets to Snoqualmie, which in the past I thought was, you know, don't even think about it. But anyway, I think we just ought to include those discussions, the budget and additional commercial spaces in this discussion, because they're not standalone of, you know, I want higher paying jobs, I want affordable housing, and I want to control the targets. I mean, it's got to be tied to the budget. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Johnson.
I just wanted to mention on that my understanding is that cities that were more dependent upon sales tax revenue may have been hit a little bit harder by the pandemic than those that are less dependent on sales tax due to those losses in revenue at those kinds of outlet malls and that sort of thing. That could be a problem for us in 100 years from now when the next pandemic hits, if we have a huge retail center that we're dependent on. I just want to mention that.
Yeah. And Jason, you were in Issaquah when they did that, so they were in a different balance as well.
Right. Issaquah historically has had a much higher percentage of their revenue come from sales taxes because they have all the, you know, they have the big box stores there on East Lake Smash. They've got Costco. They've got the auto dealerships, especially, are very large revenue sources. But as Councilmember Johnson just said, Issaquah got hit a lot harder than Snoqualmie did, at least at the, you know, the government, because of the revenue effects of being more dependent on sales tax. They had to lay staff off. They had to cut back a lot of their programs in a way that Snoqualmie, you know, we never had to lay anybody off from city staff, fortunately. Now, yes, we've had attrition and we haven't filled positions, and that is a real effect, but we also didn't, you know, we were much more limited in what we had to do to respond to it than Issaquah or Tukwila is another example. They're very heavily dependent on sales tax revenue, and they had to make some major cutbacks. So it's a double-edged sword ultimately of, you know, you do one thing and it has certain effects potentially. So it makes for a very complicated and interesting discussion ultimately.
Yeah, and I have to appreciate these docket requests because they've prompted some discussion around some very important issues, which, you know, quite frankly, you probably couldn't get more important than what we've been discussing tonight. But I do think when discussing these issues, growth, affordable housing, we ought to add the budget requirements in there and the commercial balance. We ought to add those in the discussion. Okay. Any other comments on number 3? Staff, anything from your side?
Well, I will just show really quick the schedule here so you can, although I forgot to move the "we are here" arrow, apologies for that. We're down here at April 4th. There was supposed to be a public hearing on the request tonight that obviously didn't happen, so things have kind of been shuffled around. We will have the public hearing on April 18th. As I mentioned, it will get noticed. I think the notice is in the paper either tomorrow or Wednesday. I'll have to double check on that one. And then we'll ask for a commission recommendation to the city council on the 18th following the public hearing. That, at least in that manner, the commission will have the benefit of hearing the public testimony at the public hearing before you start your deliberations. We do have to finish this up by the end of April per the city code. So that's where we will be at your next meeting for this.
Good, good. Okay. Anything else on the comprehensive plan docket?
No, sir.
Okay, if that's the case. Let's move on to item number 4. Items of planning commissioner interest.
So I did note for follow-ups, the two follow-ups I had, Commissioner Aliff had asked about the state transportation package at our previous meeting. As I think you're all aware, the legislature did approve the package. There were some minor, well, actually they weren't minor, but there were some changes to, I believe, the revenue side of the package prior to its adoption. But the expenditure side did not change. And in good news for Snoqualmie, we got, there were 2 major projects that were funded by the package. One is the, if you will, finishing Highway 18, the improvements from Deep Creek over Tiger Summit. So that was a $640 million project that the legislature fully funded with a completion date later in this decade. I don't remember the exact one. So that was a big win. Then the other one, of course, was $5 million to help repave Snoqualmie Parkway. As part of that, the city council and I believe Commissioner, or I keep doing that, Councilmember Johnson spoke to this at the previous meeting. The council has approved a resolution to direct or to authorize the mayor to work with the State Department of Transportation on converting Snoqualmie Parkway over to an extension of Highway 18. In that manner, WashDOT would then be responsible for maintaining at least the curb-to-curb pavement portion of the parkway and take it off the city's hands. So that very good news for the state transportation package for Snoqualmie.
No, definitely.
The other follow-up I had, Commissioner Lambert had asked about the awning at the Snoqualmie ice cream store, and that's the only note I have. So I can't remember if I answered it fully at the last meeting or not. I don't know if you recall, Commissioner Lambert.
I thought you answered it, essentially just what was going on with it and why it seemed to be in such disrepair. And you said it was kind of an emergency thing, so.
Yeah, okay. And then you probably all noticed that the historic design review approval for Angle and Volkers is complete. If you haven't been by, take a look. It looks very nice. They have not put the awnings up yet.
Right.
They're working on that, and we anticipate that happening in the next, hopefully, few weeks. They had to, the old awnings were unfortunately in a worse state than they anticipated, so they're having to get some new ones made instead.
Yeah, sprucing up downtown. Yeah.
Yep. So those are the follow-ups I had.
Okay, so I'll do a quick round robin for any new items of interest. Commissioner Tessman, any items to bring up?
None for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Aliff,
Not at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Smith,
Don't believe I have any this week. Thank you.
Commissioner Lambert.
Yeah, my neighbor asked me about the Dune Avenue project and them planting trees in the median between the sidewalk and the road. Can you get me the information on if that's going to happen, what trees and that kind of stuff?
Yes, they were, so the short version is and you've seen the at least the forms laid for a lot of the curbs. They are going to create those islands to try to help those intersections out, and they are planning to plant at least 1 tree per island, as I recall. What I'll do is I'll put you in touch with Phil Bennett, the city's urban forester, who can give you all the details you want about the trees.
Thanks.
Very good. Commissioner Goodman.
Don't have to spend a lot of time on it right now, but I am interested to know how the inclusion of that 5 million for the parkway impacts our negotiations with the state over Snoqualmie Parkway.
I don't know, Councilmember Johnson, do you want to speak to that a little more, since the council had a relatively extensive discussion about it. Sorry.
No problem. I think the idea is that essentially the ball is in the administration's court to negotiate, what portion will be the city's responsibility for the resurfacing and what portion will be the state's. And I think that's all just going to be negotiations that they're going to work on. I think that the mayor and the administration have some resources that they can negotiate with. So we've got some legal room, and yeah, we'll just see what they end up coming up with, and hopefully it'll be something good for us. But certainly moving forward, it's going to save our residents a great deal of money. But yeah, until they come back with an agreement with the state, I don't think that we know for sure.
All right, I'm interested to hear any news in the future on that. Thank
Yep.
you.
Me too.
Good. Anything else, Commissioner Goodman?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. And then the only thing I was going to ask about is, is there any update on the Riverwalk? And we can get an answer on that later because it's pretty late this evening. But at some point, I think it'd be good if the commission kind of get updated on progress on the Riverwalk.
I'll let Dylan give you the short version of Riverwalk.
Yeah, so the kind of shorthand of that is, as you can imagine, the Riverwalk's broken into all the pieces that make up the whole concept. Right now, we are working with our local community partners to determine the scope of Riverwalk Phase 1, which is kind of our first foray into a major development of the Riverwalk. It's not been ironed out yet, but we're working with local partners and how that links up to our grants. And then the follow-up to that will be, how do we make Sandy Cove section of trail meet the first section of trail called Phase 1, and that's closer to the falls. And then the other parts of it, there's a lot of parts of the project. I was just realizing I was about to blabber on for way too long. So what if I bring a quick presentation to the next planning commission meeting?
Right, and that's what I'm asking, rather than trying to answer it now. If you just give an update of where we are, because I know that's been a very big multi-year project. I haven't heard about it for a while.
Yeah, no worries. I thought it was gonna be short, and I realized it was definitely not gonna be.
It's a big topic. Okay, that's all I have. So upcoming schedule.
You can see the public hearing on the docket I spoke of before. I see, Dylan, do we have any DRB items? I don't believe so.
I haven't got one.
Okay. So far that you'll see the downtown relook again in 2 weeks with the changes that we discussed tonight. You'll see the docket for the public hearing and then a recommendation are the two things we have for the 18th.
Good. Okay, anything else, staff? Okay, with that, I appreciate everybody's time and overall volunteers, and it's late, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Second.
Okay, it's Commissioner Aliff motioned, Mr. Tessman second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks,
Good night,
staff.
everybody.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
staff.
everyone.
Good night.
Night.